The great chamber of the Galactic Concordance was a silent, glittering jewel. Light from 1,000 stars streamed through the transparent dome, illuminating floating platforms where delegates from a dozen powerful species watched. They were the rulers of the known galaxy. Their forms were strange and varied. Some were tall and willowy with shimmering skin, others were bulky with thick hides, and a few were globs of conscious gel in containment suits. They were the future, and in their midst, standing alone on a small central disk of metal, was a man from the past. His name was Kim Chul. He was the human ambassador, a title that felt too grand for what he was doing. He was a doctor, a scientist, not a politician. He felt small under the immense, judging gaze of the Concordance. He cleared his throat, and the sound was swallowed by the vastness of the room. Esteemed members of the Concordance, he began, his voice amplified by a hidden system. I come before you once more, not with a threat, but with a plea for recognition, a plea for a chance. From the highest platform, a figure stirred. Ambassador Klar, the representative of the Kthar, who many considered the leaders of the Concordance. He was reptilian, with scales that shifted from emerald to obsidian as he moved. His long neck arched, and his slitted eyes looked down at Kim Chul with an emotion that was not quite hatred, but something colder, pure, undisguised disdain. The plea of humanity is a familiar sound in this chamber, Ambassador Kim, Klar said, his voice a dry hiss. And our answer remains the same. Your species is not ready. Kim Chul took a slow breath, keeping his hands from clenching into fists. With respect, Ambassador, your definition of ready is what we question. We have achieved faster than light travel. We have established colonies on 3 extrasolar worlds. We have art, science, philosophy. You have chaos, Klar interrupted, his tone final. You have emotions that control your logic. You have a history drenched in the blood of your own kind. You are, by our most careful analysis, a pre-contact species. You are supposed to be developing in isolation, unaware of the greater galactic community. Your accidental discovery of our existence was an unfortunate error. Our continued observation of you is a burden we tolerate. Kim Chul's heart sank. This was the same argument every time. He thought of the reports from the edge of human space. The Vrox Collective, a brutal, expansionist empire, was circling. Their scouts had been sighted near human colonies. They were like sharks smelling blood in the water. The Concordance's official neutrality was a death sentence. The Vrox Collective does not share your restraint, Kim Chul said, choosing his words carefully. They are moving into systems we have claimed. They have attacked our scout ships. Without the protection of the Concordance, without even a formal recognition of our right to exist, we are defenseless. We are asking for a chance to prove ourselves. Grant us provisional membership. Lend us your diplomatic weight. That is all we ask. A low murmur, like the rustling of dry leaves, went through the chamber. Another delegate, a hulking creature with tusks and thick, gray skin, spoke. This was Fleet Director Vrox, the representative of the Vrox Collective himself. His presence was a calculated insult. The defenseless humans have sharp teeth for such a soft species. Vrox grunted, his voice like grinding stones. They trespass in systems we have long claimed for resource extraction. Their colonies are squatters on valuable worlds. They are the aggressors. The Concordance should grant us the right to pacify this nuisance. Kim Chul felt a cold fury rise in his chest. It was a lie, a perfect lie to justify an invasion. He looked from Vrox's smug, brutal face to Klar's cold, dispassionate one. He saw the understanding there. Klar knew the Vrox were lying. He simply did not care. Humanity was not worth the political capital. The galaxy is a large place, Ambassador Kim, Klar said, his voice dripping with condescension. There are races here whose civilizations were ancient when your ancestors were first learning to use fire. We have seen empires rise and fall. The Vrox Collective, for all its vigor, is a known entity. They are part of the galactic order. You are not. You are an unpredictable variable. A dangerous one. He leaned forward, his scales catching the light. Your petition for membership and defense is denied. Your request for protection is rejected. The Galactic Concordance officially classifies humanity as a volatile quarantined species. You will receive no aid. You will be offered no shelter. You are on your own. The words hung in the air, cold and absolute. The final nail in the coffin. Kim Chul stood perfectly still. The hope he had carried for months, for years, drained out of him, leaving only a hollow, aching certainty. This was it. The diplomatic path was closed. Forever. He bowed his head, not in submission, but to hide the fire in his eyes. I see, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Yet the amplifiers caught it and sent it echoing through the silent chamber. The Concordance has made its position perfectly clear. We are alone. We thank you for your time. He was not escorted out with honor. 2 robotic sentries glided down, their metal forms impassive, and gestured for him to follow. He walked, his steps heavy, away from the glittering dome and the faces of the beings who had just condemned his species to death. The great doors slid shut behind him with a final, thunderous boom. He was led through sterile, white corridors, back to the docking bay where his small, unarmed diplomatic shuttle was waiting. The sentries stopped at the bay entrance, their programming complete. They turned and left him without a word. Inside his shuttle, the air was still and cold. He sat in the pilot's chair, not moving for a long time. He stared at the blank console, seeing not the instruments, but the cold eyes of Clar, the smug grin of Rox. He saw the future they had chosen, a future of fire and blood. Finally, he moved. His fingers, which had been trembling, now became steady. He reached not for the ship's controls, but for a small, nondescript panel beneath the main console. He pressed a hidden sequence. The panel slid open, revealing a single, simple interface with a single, red button. It was not a part of the shuttle's standard design. It was a gift from a different branch of humanity, one the Concordance had never seen and would never understand. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He thought of his family on Earth. He thought of the colonists on Kepler 186f, tending their fields, unaware of the storm coming for them. He thought of the 50 years of secret labor, the resources poured into a project so dark, so final, that most of humanity's own leaders did not know its full scope. It was called the Silent Resolution, and its time had come. His role was over. The plea for peace had failed. Now the plea for war would begin. He pressed the button. There was no sound, no flash of light. But from the shuttle, a single, hypercompressed, untraceable data burst shot out into the void. It traveled faster than light, aimed at a seemingly empty point in deep space, far beyond any human colony, a place known only as the Veil. The message was not long. It was just a code, a prearranged signal, for words that would change the galaxy forever. The door is closed. The garden is unprotected. Proceed with harvest. Kim Chul leaned back in his chair, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. He had just unleashed the wolf. He had just given the order for humanity to shed its skin of helplessness and reveal the fangs it had been sharpening in the dark for half a century. He felt a profound sadness, and beneath it, a terrifying, grim satisfaction. The Concordance had chosen blindness. Now, they would learn the cost. The world known as Kepler 186f was a green and blue jewel against the black velvet of space. The humans who lived there called it Eden's bounty, and the name fit. Its soil was rich, its rains were gentle, and its sun cast a warm, reddish light on fields of golden grain and lush forests. It was a peaceful world, a farming colony. Its only defenses were a few old orbital scanners and a small militia with light rifles. It was a soft, quiet place, utterly unprepared for the storm that was coming. The storm arrived not with thunder, but with the silent terror of reality. One moment, the space near the colony's largest farming settlement was empty. The next, it was filled with the brutal, jagged shapes of Rock's warships. They were not sleek or beautiful. They were weapons, pure and simple, all sharp angles and weapon barrels, painted in harsh shades of rust red and dried blood brown. The lead ship, the World Render, was a massive, blocky vessel that looked less like a ship and more like a flying fortress. On the bridge of the world render, Fleet Director Vrox watched the peaceful world on his main screen. A low, guttural sound of satisfaction rumbled in his chest. He had listened to the human, Kim Chul, beg and whine in the concordance chamber. It had been amusing. This was better. This was real. "The garden is ripe," he said to his second-in-command, a hulking Vrox named Gore. "Begin the harvest. But first, burn the thorns." Gore nodded, his tusks gleaming. "Yes, Director." Down on the surface, in the main settlement of New Hope, a young farmer named Lee Ji-hyun was walking back from the fields. The air was sweet with the smell of earth and growing things. She looked up at the sky as she often did to see the stars. But tonight she saw something else. New stars moving fast, and they were getting brighter. A siren began to wail. It was a sound no one on Eden's bounty had ever heard before. A sound of pure panic. The comms tower was broadcasting a frantic, repeating message. "Unidentified vessels. You are in sovereign human space. Identify yourselves." There was no answer. Only a sudden, blinding flash of light from the sky. A lance of plasma, hotter than the heart of a star, screamed down from the world render. It did not hit the comms tower. It hit the center of the town square. There was no explosion, not at first. There was an instant, terrifying silence as the air itself was vaporized. Then the ground erupted, throwing up a wave of molten rock and superheated dirt. The sound that followed was a world-ending roar. Lee Ji-hyun was thrown to the ground. The heat washed over her, searing her skin. She pushed herself up, her ears ringing, her vision blurred. Where the town square had been, there was now a smoking crater. The houses around it were gone. The people were gone. Everything was fire and smoke and screams. More plasma bolts fell from the sky. They targeted the power plant, the spaceport, the water purification center. They were systematically destroying the colony's ability to function, to fight back, to live. Then the dropships came. They fell from the bellies of the Vrox warships like ugly, metallic seeds. They crashed into the fields and the burning streets. Ramps slammed down, and Vrox warriors emerged. They were massive, clad in heavy, spiked armor, their faces hidden behind helmets that showed only glowing red eyepieces. They carried heavy energy rifles that spat bolts of sizzling green fire. They did not just shoot the people. They rounded them up, hurting the terrified, screaming survivors like animals. Those who resisted or who were too slow were cut down without a second thought. The Vrox were not there to conquer the population. They were there for the planet itself. The people were just pests in the way or, at best, a source of slave labor. Lee Ji-hyun scrambled behind the smoldering wreck of a ground transport. She saw a Vrox warrior grab an old man, a farmer she knew named Mr. Park. The warrior shoved him to the ground and pointed its rifle at his head. There was a flash of green, and Mr. Park was still. Tears streamed down Ji-hyun's face, cutting through the grime. This was not a battle. It was a slaughterhouse. High above, the Concordance saw it all. In a pristine, clean observation post hidden in a nearby asteroid field, Ambassador Klar watched the sensor feeds. The data scrolled across his screen. Energy signatures, casualty estimates, Vrox troop deployments. It was all very clinical. One of his aides, a younger Kthar, shifted uncomfortably. "Ambassador, the human distress signals. They are quite intense. The loss of life appears significant." Klar did not look away from the screen. The loss of life is always significant in these matters. But it is a necessary process. The Vrox are efficient. They will pacify the region and secure the resources. The human colony was unsustainable anyway. Their skria, discipline. A civilized species would accept its fate with silence. He saw only data points and political outcomes. He was blind to the terror in Lee Ji-hyun's eyes as she ran for her life. He was deaf to the screams of children. To him, it was just noise, the regrettable but necessary cost of maintaining galactic order. But someone else was listening, and they were not just listening. They were recording. Back on Eden's bounty, the chaos was absolute. The colony's militia tried to fight. They were farmers and engineers with hunting rifles. Their puny bullets pinged harmlessly off the Vrok's armor. The green energy bolts from the Vrok's rifles, however, tore through human bodies with terrifying ease. Amidst the chaos, a signal was being sent. It was not a scream for help. That signal was being broadcast openly, and it was being ignored. This was a different signal. It was hidden, a whisper buried deep within the colony's dying communications network. It was a hypercompressed data stream, a river of pure information flowing from a dozen hidden sensor pods the colonists had planted years ago for geological surveys. This data stream contained everything: the precise energy frequency of the Vrok's plasma lances, the power output of their ship shields, the unique ion trail of their engines, the formation patterns of their fleet, the communication codes they were using. Every shot fired, every maneuver made, every order given was being captured, analyzed, and packaged into a tight, information-dense bullet. This bullet was not aimed at the Concordance. It was aimed at a single, specific point in deep space, a point with no planets, no stars, nothing. Lee Ji-hyun, hiding in a drainage pipe, saw a Vrok's warrior step on a small metal device half buried in the mud. It was one of the sensor pods. The warrior crushed it under his heavy boot without a second thought. He didn't know that in its last millisecond of life, it had sent a final burst of data, confirming the structural weakness of Vrok's battle armor under concentrated kinetic impact. The hidden signal continued to transmit, a silent, unseen witness to the horror. It was the ultimate intelligence coup paid for in human blood. The Vroks, in their arrogance, believed they were fighting primitives. They had no idea they were performing a live-fire demonstration of all their capabilities for an unseen audience. The World Render hung in orbit, a silent, brutal god. Fleet Director Vrox watched the fires burning on the planet's surface. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The harvest was proceeding exactly as planned. The humans were being erased. Their world would soon be his. The Galactic Concordance was watching, and they were doing nothing. It was perfect. He had no idea that his every move was being studied. He had no idea that the desperate, chaotic, and seemingly helpless defense of the humans was a carefully staged performance, a piece of tragic theater designed to lure him into revealing all his secrets. The cost of the Concordance's blindness was not just the blood being spilled on the planet below. The true cost was the priceless information being gathered, the blueprint for the Vrox's own destruction. The reaping had begun, but the harvest the Vrox would ultimately reap was one of fire and ruin, sown by their own arrogance and watered with human blood. The space where the human fleet waited was a place of absolute nothing. There were no stars nearby, no planets, not even the faint glow of a distant nebula. It was a perfect, empty black, a pocket of void chosen for its complete isolation. Here, in the silence between the stars, the ghosts waited. The largest of these ghosts was the UTS Silent Retribution. It was nothing like the blocky, utilitarian ships of the public human fleet. It was a dagger, long and sleek, forged from a material that drank the light. Its surface was unnaturally dark, a black so deep it looked like a tear in the fabric of space itself. There were no bright running lights, no glowing engine ports. It was cold, silent, and patient. Inside, the air was still and cool. The bridge was not a loud, busy place like in the old videos of naval ships. It was a dimly lit cavern, all soft, glowing screens and quiet hums. The crew spoke in low murmurs. They moved with a calm, deliberate purpose. There was no panic here, no fear. Only a grim, focused energy. In the center of the bridge, sitting in a command chair that seemed to be grown from the ship itself, was Captain Lee Jun. He was a man in his 50s, his hair streaked with gray, his face lined not with age, but with the weight of command. His eyes were fixed on the main view screen, which showed a live feed from Kepler 186f. He watched the Vrox ships, like ugly black insects, circling the green world. He watched the pinpricks of light that were plasma bombs hitting the surface. He did not look away. He made himself watch. Beside him, Commander Park Mina monitored the streams of data flowing into her console. She was younger than the captain, her face sharp and intelligent. Her fingers danced across the screen, sorting, analyzing, cataloging. Every few seconds, A new packet of information arrived from the hidden sensors on Eden's bounty. Another data burst is in, Captain, she said, her voice calm and clear in the quiet bridge. We now have a complete power profile of their lead ship, the World Render. Their shield harmonics are logged. Their point defense weapon arcs are mapped. Li Jun gave a slow, single nod. He did not speak. A man in a doctor's white coat stepped onto the bridge. This was Dr. Kim Chul. He looked older than he had in the concordance chamber. The defiance was gone from his eyes, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. He came to stand beside the captain's chair, his arms crossed, and he too looked at the screen. They took the bait, Kim Chul said softly, just as we knew they would. They are predictable, Li Jun replied, his voice a low rumble. Brutality always is. The concordance denied our petition, Kim Chul continued, as if confirming it to himself. Klar said we were volatile, emotional, a danger to ourselves. He gestured toward the screen, where a Vrox dropship was firing into a crowd of fleeing colonists. And he called them a known entity. On the screen, a building exploded, a silent flower of fire and debris. Li Jun's jaw tightened, the only sign of the storm raging inside him. They are blind, he said. They look at our history, our passion, and they see only chaos. They cannot understand that it is this same passion that allows a mother to lift a crashed vehicle to save her child. That it is this same emotion that makes a soldier throw himself on a grenade to save his friends. They see it as a weakness. He turned his head slightly to look at Kim Chul. They were wrong. The cost of their blindness is being paid right now, Kim Chul said, his voice thick. In blood. Those are our people down there, June. I know, the captain said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I see them. I will never forget a single one of them. He turned back to the screen. Mina. Status of the fleet. Park Mina tapped her console. A holographic display flickered to life above her station. It showed dozens of ships, all of the same dark, dagger-like design as the silent retribution. They were arranged in a perfect, silent formation in the void. The silent resolution reports ready. The unyielding vengeance is in position. The Fist of Terra is standing by. All 72 vessels of the First Shadow Fleet are operational and awaiting your command, Captain. 72 ships. This was not a desperate last stand. It was an army, the product of 50 years of secret labor. While humanity pretended to be fractured and weak, while they built farming colonies and sent diplomats to beg, they had been building this. They had poured their best minds, their greatest resources, into a single project hidden in the dark. The Silent Resolution. A fleet designed for one thing, to be the final, absolute answer to any threat. All data from Kepler 186f has been integrated into our targeting computers. Park Mina continued. We know their shield frequencies. We know where their armor is weak. We know how they think. They have shown us everything. Li Jun took a deep breath and let it out slowly. The time for watching was over. Signal the fleet, he said, his voice now firm and clear, carrying across the quiet bridge. Move to attack positions. Activate the silent drives. We jump in 10 minutes. Throughout the Ghost Fleet, the order was received. On 72 bridges, 72 captains acknowledged. There were no cheers, no shouts of war. Only a silent, determined readiness. The silent retribution began to thrum with a low, powerful energy. It was a vibration felt in the bones, not heard with the ears. The dark hull of the ship seemed to shimmer for a moment, like heat haze on a desert road. Then, the space around it began to bend and twist. There was no bright flash, no roaring engine. The ship simply started to fade, its dark form blending into the deeper black of the void. Li Jun stood up from his chair. He walked to the view screen, standing so close he could see nothing else. He saw the fires of New Hope. He saw the Vrox ships, arrogant and secure in their power. For 50 years, he said, not to his crew, but to the people on the planet below, we have hidden our fangs. We have played the part of the helpless lamb for the wolves of the galaxy. We hoped that reason would prevail. We hoped that we would not have to become the monsters they feared we were. He clenched his fist at his side. That hope is gone. Today we show them the truth. We are not lambs. We are the guardians of the flock. And we have very, very sharp teeth. He turned to face Park Mina. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes burned with a cold fire. Take us to war, Commander. The silent retribution completed its fade from the nothing space. It was now a ghost, invisible, undetectable, moving faster than light towards Kepler 186f. It was not alone. An entire fleet of ghosts traveled with it, a silent armada of vengeance. The Vrox believed the hunt was over. They believed they were the predators. They were about to learn a terrible final lesson. The most dangerous predator is not the one that roars the loudest. It is the one you never see coming. The bridge of the Vrox command ship, World Render, was a place of loud noise and celebration. Fleet Director Vrox sat in his rough-hewn command throne, a cup of thick, bitter brew in his hand. On the main screen, he watched the pleasing patterns of destruction on the planet below. Plumes of smoke rose from the human settlements. The reports coming in spoke of minimal resistance and maximum plunder. See? He grunted to his second, Gore. This is what happens when you show strength. The humans break. They are soft, like their world. Gore nodded, his tusks clicking together. Their screams are already fading, Director. The harvest will be bountiful. A junior officer looked up from a sensor panel. Director, we are detecting a minor gravitational fluctuation. It is probably just a sensor ghost. This system has a lot of debris. Vrox waved a dismissive hand. Ignore it. Focus on the ground assault. I want their primary grain silos secured by nightfall. The fluctuation was not a ghost. It was the breath of a predator. In the empty space at the very center of the Vrox fleet formation. Reality itself began to groan. It was a sound felt only as a wrongness in the pit of the stomach, a pressure that made teeth ache. Space twisted, warping the light from the distant stars into strange, shimmering lines. Then, it happened. The UTS silent retribution Decloaked did not appear from the edge of the system. It did not approach from a jump point. It simply was. One moment there was nothing. The next, a 2-kilometer-long dagger of pure blackness hung in the void, right in the middle of the Vrox fleet. It was so close to the World Render that the Vrox ship filled its entire forward view. It was an impossible, terrifying sight. A ship materializing from nowhere. On the bridge of the World Render. Every alarm screamed at once. The celebratory mood shattered into a chaos of panic and confusion. Officers scrambled at their stations, their screens flashing red with collision warnings and unknown contacts. Fleet Director Vrox stared, his drink forgotten. His brain refused to process what he was seeing. What is that? He roared. Where did it come from? The human ship did not hail them. It did not demand their surrender. It offered no communication at all. It was a monument of silent, final judgment. On the bridge of the silent retribution, there was no chaos. There was only a cold, surgical calm. Captain Lee Jun looked at the massive bulk of the World Render on his screen. He saw the Vrox ship's every detail, every weapon port, every shield emitter. He saw it all through the lens of the data paid for in blood on the planet below. Primary target is locked, Commander Park Mina said, her voice steady. Her fingers rested lightly on her console. Their shield frequency is matched. Their power core is identified. Lee Jun did not hesitate. He did not give a grand speech. He simply gave the order he had waited 50 years to give. All batteries, he said, his voice flat and hard. Fire. The silent retribution did not use plasma or lasers. It used something simpler and far more terrifying. Along its dark hull, massive magnetic rails glowed with contained energy. Then, with a sound that was less a noise and more a physical shockwave, it fired. A projectile the size of a ground car was launched. It was not an explosive shell. It was a solid, tungsten carbide rod. It moved at a significant fraction of the speed of light, a spear thrown by a god. The Vrox shields designed to deflect energy weapons were tuned to the exact wrong frequency. The relativistic kill vehicle passed through them as if they were not there. There was no flash, no dramatic explosion against a shimmering barrier. The shield simply failed to notice the weapon that was about to kill it. The tungsten rod struck the Worldrender amidships. The effect was not like a bomb. It was far worse. The kinetic energy of the impact was so immense that it could not be contained. The rod punched straight through the armored hull like it was paper, kept going, tearing through decks, compartments, and power conduits. It turned everything in its path into superheated plasma. It exited the other side of the massive ship, leaving a perfect molten hole. For a single silent second, nothing happened. Then, the internal pressures and ruptured power cores did their work. The Worldrender came apart. It did not explode outward. It seemed to crumple in on itself for a moment before being ripped into a million pieces by a series of violent internal detonations. One moment it was the flagship of a mighty fleet. The next, it was an expanding cloud of incandescent gas and metal fragments. The communication channels, which had been filled with Vrock's battle chants and orders, fell into a deafening silence. The silence lasted for only a heartbeat. Then, hell broke loose. The silent retribution moved. Its dark form slid through the debris field of its first kill. Its point defense systems, small and incredibly fast, came to life. Vrock's fighters, scrambling to engage, were swatted from the void. They exploded into brief, pretty fireballs that lit up the dark hull of the human ship. The rest of the Vrock's fleet, leaderless and confused, began to fire. Green plasma bolts and laser beams shot through the space where the human ship was. But the human ship was never there. It moved with an impossible grace, its maneuvers sharp and unpredictable. It weaved through their formations, a shadow they could not catch on the silent retribution. Park Mina worked her console with a dancer's precision. Cruiser target starboard side. Its engine nacelle is vulnerable. Railgun 2, fire. Another tungsten rod shot out. The Vrock's cruiser tried to turn, but it was too slow. The rod struck the nacelle, and the entire back half of the ship tore itself apart in a chain reaction of failing systems. Destroyer target moving to engage. Their forward shields are strongest. Firing solution. Underside, aft of the command deck. Another rod. Another kill. It was not a fight. It was a dismantling. The humans knew every weakness, every flaw. They fought with a cold, emotionless efficiency that was more frightening than any Vrock's war cry. They were like surgeons, and the Vrock's fleet was their patient, being taken apart piece by piece. Down on the planet, Lee Ji-hyun huddled in a crater, clutching a piece of broken metal as a weapon. She looked up as the sky suddenly lit up with new stars. But these were strange stars. They were the silent, quick flashes of dying Vrock's ships. She saw the massive Worldrender, the ship that had killed her home, simply vanish in a great flash of light. She saw the other Vrock's ships, the ones that had seemed so invincible, now burning and breaking apart in the silence of space. She did not understand what was happening, but she saw the Vrock's warriors on the ground stop their advance. They looked up at the sky, their confident postures gone, replaced by confusion, and then, for the first time, fear. A single thought bloomed in Ji-hyun's heart, a small, defiant spark in the darkness. Someone came in the Concordance observation post. Ambassador Klar watched the sensor feeds. His cold, reptilian blood felt like ice. The data on his screen was impossible. The human ship had appeared from nothing. It had destroyed the Vrock's flagship in a single, shocking blow. It was now systematically erasing the entire Vrock's fleet with a technology that defied every law of physics the Concordance understood. This was not the work of a volatile pre-contact species. This was the work of a predator that had been hunting long before the Concordance even knew it existed. The cost of his blindness, of the entire Concordance's blindness, was being tallied not in diplomatic memos, but in the blood of their allies, smeared across the stars. The human vessel was a statement. And the statement was, "You left us to die. Now, see what you have unleashed." The silence that followed the destruction of the Worldrender was brief and terrible. It was the silence of a predator taking a breath before it continued its hunt. The Vrock's fleet, now a headless snake, thrashed in its death throes. Ships turned wildly, firing their plasma cannons at the empty space where the human ship had been a moment before. Their formations, once tight and disciplined, dissolved into a chaotic scramble. The UTS Silent Retribution moved through this chaos like a shark through a school of panicked fish. It did not run. It did not hide. It advanced, a dark sliver of death. Its point defense systems were a blur of motion. They fired not lasers, but hypervelocity slugs of dense metal. Any Vrox fighter that dared to approach was instantly shredded into sparkling dust. They were not just being destroyed. They were being erased from existence. On the bridge, Commander Park Mina's voice was a calm, steady rhythm against the backdrop of silent destruction on the view screen. Target: Vrox Cruiser Blooddrinker. Its primary power relay is exposed on the dorsal spine. Firing solution locked. A single magnetic rail on the Silent Retribution glowed and thumped. A tungsten rod crossed the distance in a blink. It struck the exact spot Mina had identified. The Blooddrinker's spine snapped. Power failed. Lights all over the ship winked out, and it began to drift, a dead hulk. Target: Vrox Destroyer Skullcrusher. It is attempting to power its main drive for a ramming maneuver. Their engine shielding is weakest at the injection port. Another railgun fired. The rod pierced the injection port. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the destroyer's own engine plasma, with no way to escape, burst back into the ship. The Skullcrusher vomited fire from every port and seam before blowing apart in a spectacular, silent flower of flame. Captain Lee Jun watched it all. He did not smile. He did not cheer. He sat in his command chair, his face a mask of grim necessity. Each Vrox ship that died was a small measure of justice for the lives lost on the planet below. But it was a cold, hollow justice. It would not bring back the dead. The Vrox tried to fight back. They fired everything they had. Green plasma bolts crisscrossed the void. But the human ship was a ghost. It anticipated their every move. It slid between the bolts, its dark hull untouched. Their targeting computers could not get a lock. Their sensors showed nothing but static and shadows. They were fighting an enemy they could not see, could not hit, and could not understand. Down on the surface of Kepler 186f, the nature of the war had changed. Lee Ji-hyun, still hiding in her drainage pipe, saw a group of Vrox warriors who had been advancing on a group of hidden colonists. They suddenly stopped. Their leader was barking into his communicator, his red eyepieces flashing with frantic energy. Then he looked up at the sky, where the flashes of dying ships were becoming more and more frequent. He gave a sharp, guttural order. The Vrox warriors turned around. They were not advancing anymore. They were retreating. They were running back towards their dropships, their movements hurried and fearful. The hunters had become the hunted. A new sound joined the crackle of fire and the distant screams. It was a low, powerful hum that grew steadily louder. Ji-hyun looked up. Descending from the clouds was a human ship. It was not dark and dagger-like like the Silent Retribution. It was a blocky, sturdy-looking transport ship, painted white with a red cross on its side. Medical frigates. Help had arrived. Tears of relief streamed down her face. They had not been forgotten. In the Concordance observation post, the mood was one of pure, undiluted horror. Ambassador Clark could no longer lean back in his chair with condescending calm. He was standing, his slender body rigid, his claws digging into the console before him. The sensor feeds showed the impossible. The entire Vrox fleet was being systematically dismantled. Ship after ship was turning from a powerful warship into a cloud of debris. His aide stood beside him, trembling. Ambassador, their technology. It should not be possible. The energy readings. The precision. This is not the work of a primitive species. Clark could not speak. He watched as the human ship, the Silent Retribution, executed a final, brutal maneuver. It flew straight through the heart of the last group of Vrox cruisers. As it passed, its point defense guns fired in every direction, not at the cruisers themselves, but at the swarm of fighters they had launched. Dozens of Vrox fighters died in a single, coordinated volley. their explosions lighting up the dark hull of the human vessel like a ghastly celebration. Then, the human ship turned. It was finished with the Vrox. Its bow swung slowly, deliberately, until it was pointed directly at the location of the hidden Concordance observation post. It did not fire. It did not power any visible weapons. It simply hung there in the void, a silent, dark monument. IT was looking at them. Clar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. The human ship knew they were there. It had known all along. The display of power they had just witnessed was not just for the Vrox. It was for the Concordance. It was a message, written in the blood of their allies. The cost of their blindness was no longer an abstract concept. It was a 2-kilometer-long warship staring right at them, its silence more threatening than any declaration of war. They had dismissed humanity as emotional and volatile. But the calm, surgical, and total destruction of a Vrox fleet was not the act of an emotional creature. It was the act of a patient, calculating, and utterly ruthless one. The human ship began to move, gliding slowly and menacingly towards the observation post. On the bridge, Clar could see the tiny, distant star that was its main sensor array. He felt, for the first time in his long, arrogant life, a sensation he barely recognized. It was fear. The UTS Silent Retribution hung in the void, its dark form a stark cutout against the scattered debris of the Vrox fleet. The battle was over. The last Vrox warship had been silenced, its wreckage cooling alongside the ruins of its companions. The silence that returned to the space around Kepler 186f was profound, but it was no longer the silence of peace. It was the silence of judgment. The human ship turned with a slow, deliberate grace. Its bow, which had moments before been a tool of annihilation, now pointed towards a seemingly empty patch of space. But there was nothing empty about it. Inside the cloaked Concordance observation post, panic was setting in. Ambassador Clar could not tear his eyes from the main screen. The human ship filled his view. It was close, too close. Its dark, weapon-covered hull was a terrifying sight. He could see the scorch marks from near misses and the subtle glow of its still active systems. This was not a ship from the reports of a pre-contact species. This was a weapon from a nightmare. They are looking at us, his aide whispered, his voice trembling. They have known we were here the entire time, Clar replied, his own voice hollow. The realization was a physical blow. The humans had not just fought the Vrox. They had performed for the Concordance. They had lured the Vrox into revealing their full strength, and then they had demonstrated, with brutal clarity, that they possessed the power to erase that strength completely. The humans had used the Vrox as a living example. On the bridge of the Silent Retribution, the mood was calm. The crew went about their tasks, their faces showing no triumph, only the quiet satisfaction of a grim job completed. The Concordance observation post is still cloaked, but their sensor shadow is clear, Park Mina reported. Their power levels are spiking. I believe they are considering running. They will not, Captain Lee Jun said, his voice low. Their fear will freeze them. It is the nature of bullies when they finally meet a greater power. He stood up from his command chair. He walked to the center of the bridge, standing before the main view screen. He straightened his uniform. Open a channel. All frequencies. Audio only. I want my voice to be the only thing they hear. A light on the comms officer's panel glowed green. Channel open, Captain. You are live to the entire Concordance network. Lee Jun took a slow, deep breath. He did not shout. He did not growl. He spoke in a calm, measured tone, his voice flat and hard, like granite. It was a voice stripped of all emotion, and for that, it was more terrifying than any scream. Ambassador Clar, members of the Galactic Concordance. In the observation post, Clar flinched as if struck. The voice came from every speaker, clear and intimate, as if the human captain were standing right beside him. You judged us, the voice continued. You looked upon humanity and you saw only what you wished to see. You called us volatile. You called us emotional. You called us a danger. You said we offered nothing. There was a pause, filled only by the hum of the ship's systems. You were wrong. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a world. Our emotions are not a weakness. They are the source of our strength. Our rage at injustice, our love for our children, our will to protect our own no matter the cost. These are the things you cannot quantify. These are the things you dismissed. You saw our passion and called it chaos. But it is this passion that allows us to endure. It is this passion that drove us to build this, he said. And though he did not gesture, everyone listening knew he meant the ship, the fleet, the hidden power. While you watched and judged, we were working. While you dismissed us, we were preparing. Li Jun's voice grew colder, if that was possible. You left us to die. You condemned a peaceful colony to slaughter because it was politically convenient. You believed your technology made you safe. You believed your laws made you right. You were blind. Another pause. This one was longer, letting the accusation hang in the air. This was not a display of power. It was a lesson. The Vroks were the example. They believed in strength through brutality. We believe in strength through resolve. You have now seen the difference. He took a final, sharp breath. The age of your judgment is over. The era where you decide the fate of species from your distant, safe thrones is done. Do not look for us. Do not try to find our worlds. We will be watching. And if you ever threaten a single human life again, if you ever even look at one of our colonies with hostile intent, the silence that follows will not be the silence of space. It will be the silence of your extinct civilizations. The cost of your blindness ends today. The next cost will be your existence. The transmission cut off. The sudden silence in the Concordance observation post was absolute. The human ship on the screen had not moved. It was still there, a dark, silent promise. Then, it began to change. The dark hull of the silent retribution started to shimmer. It wavered, like a mirage in the desert heat. The sharp edges blurred. The terrifying details faded. Within seconds, the massive warship was gone. It had not jumped to faster-than-light travel. It had not flown away. It had simply vanished, returning to the cloak from which it had come. It was gone. But everyone who had heard the message knew it was still there. Watching on the surface of Kepler 186f, Li Jihyun was being helped into a medical frigate. A blanket was wrapped around her shoulders. She looked up at the sky. The Vroks ships were gone. The strange, dark human ship was gone too. The sky was clear, showing the familiar, comforting stars. But she knew something fundamental had changed. Humanity was not what the galaxy had thought. They were not helpless. They had a protector, a silent and terrifying guardian. Ambassador Klar slowly sank back into his chair. The screens showed nothing but empty space and the wreckage of his arrogance. The human was right. They had been blind. They had judged an entire species by their own narrow standards and had missed the truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not their technology, frightening as it was. It was their will, a will forged in the fire of being abandoned and tempered in the cold of space. The human vessel had decloaked, and in doing so, it had ripped away the blindfold from the entire galaxy. The cost of that blindness had been paid in Vrok's blood across the stars, and the galaxy would never, ever be the same again.